Welcome to Model 6, Developing Sessions for Reflection Activities in Schools. In this session, you will learn the concept of reflection activities, the role of educators in the reflection activities, the steps needed to implement a reflection activity, the steps needed to report a reflection activity, and the steps to develop your own reflection activities. This model is divided into two main learning units. The first learning unit concerns to the conceptual part of the reflection activities applied to the topic of bullying, namely why these activities are important to implement with the students and what is the role of the facilitator. You will be also given the chance to build your own concept of reflection activity. The second learning unit regards the practical part of the reflection activities. It comprises a set of 10 practical activities that you can implement with your students. There, you will find the benefits, top tips, steps for implementation, and materials needed. This second unit ends with 2 exercises. At the end of the model, you will be presented with a short learning assessment questionnaire, following the same structure of the previous models. The contents of the model will be similar to the structure presented in the abstract. The learning unit A refers to the introduction to the concept of reflection activities, and in addition to the theoretical part, there will be one practical activity for you at the end of the learning unit. The learning unit B regards the implementation aspects of reflection activities. In this same learning unit, you will find 2 practical activities to apply, 1 or more activities at your choice, and another exercise for you to create your own reflection activity. Remember, in the context of Safe Schools project, reflection activities are always connected to the topic of bullying. Are you ready to start? Let's go! I'm presenting you now the Learning Unit A, Introduction to the Concept of Reflection Activities. This learning unit is divided in 3 sub-units. The first one explains what are reflection activities. The second one, what are the main purpose of reflection activities. And the third subunit explains the role that educators play in reflection activities. At the end of the learning unit, you'll be presented with a practical activity. The previous mentioned structure was designed to help you to know what are reflection activities and to identify the goals that can be obtained through them. The knowledge acquired here will be related to the concept, theoretical and practical, of reflection activities. At the end of the learning unit, your expected skills are to be able to identify reflection activities, to be able to identify the different goals through the implementation of reflection activities, and to be able to identify and perform the role of facilitator when implementing reflection activities. Subunit 1. What are reflection activities? Reflection activities can be perceived as the act of taking time to reflect about one's feelings, actions, and beliefs, which, according to several authors and experts in the subject, is of extreme relevance, especially in the case of bullying. Developing the capacity of reflecting will enable students to analyze, understand, and recognize bullying situations, and at the same time will empower them to find solutions rather than act impulsively, as well as to weigh the consequences of their actions. Bullying can be perceived differently by each individual, as we are trying to show you in this slide. So it's important for students to reflect each other's perspectives and break down their thoughts into positive actions. There are several different reflection activities, as you will see in the next learning unit, but all of them share common features. These features concern the level of reflection activities, the format of reflection activities, the context in which they can occur, and to which education level they must be adapted to. In general, reflection activities must involve a period of individual reflection, and only after that, as an option, they can be developed in pairs or in groups. This dynamic will allow students, first, to acknowledge their own feelings, and secondly, to identify common values with the group and share different perspectives within the group. And then learn how to deal with differences in a positive manner. These activities can take the format of class discussion, role play, journaling, quiz, questionnaires, and many others, involving several techniques such as reading, writing, drawing, and telling. Reflection activities can be implemented in several contexts, such as within the classroom, outside in the playground, in a study trip, and many others. Please remember that when building or choosing a reflection activity related to bullying, it's very important to consider the ones that are in line with the student's skills and development stage, which means their education level. Since reflection activities can be in various forms and shapes, they can also be implemented at any stage of the student's learning process. In other words, reflection activities can be integrated in the beginning of a learning experience, for instance, to reflect about current feelings and perceptions. It can also be integrated in the middle of the learning process as a tool to analyze and measure the changes in the behavior or perspectives. Or you can also integrate reflection activities at the end of a learning experience to reflect about the lessons learned. None of this is mandatory or has a strict line to follow. You, as a facilitator, have the capacity to decide in which point of the learning process students should reflect about bullying. When implementing reflection activities, you, as a facilitator, should take this as an opportunity to clarify students about the bullying, in what forms it can occur, possible reasons that may push someone in being a bully, types of consequences for both victims and bullies, how to collaborate with the school to prevent and solve problems related to bullying, and so on. The list is long, so it's important for you to define a subtopic related with bullying as an objective of the reflection activity and lead the implementation and group discussions towards that goal. Reflection activities can be also perceived as tools to boost individuals' learning potential, but also leverages collaborative learning in group. Through reflection activities, students reflect their thoughts and perspectives and past actions, namely identifying their own potential mistakes, and start to shift towards a more positive behavior. That's why educators have such an important role in facilitating reflection activities. It's what concerns the Unit 3, the relevant role that educators play. The facilitator here can be a teacher, an educator, a guidance professional. It's basically the person who organizes, implements, and mediates reflection activities. The facilitator starts by designing the structure of the reflection activity, including its goals, material, steps. However, in order for the reflection activities reach these proposed objectives, facilitators must ensure that the activity follows the desired path and that students are being guided toward the conclusion that they are expected to make. Additionally, if due to some reason the conclusions taken by the students are not the most appropriate ones, the facilitator also acts as a mediator in this situation and should re-guide students' discussion towards the positive path or back to the desired path. A quite important fact when a facilitator is implementing a reflection activity is that he or she must be very attentive, since throughout the dynamic, the facilitator can identify any case of bullying, a past case, a current case, or threats that can lead to a future one. And this is something that needs immediate intervention. So the role here is relevant since it can allow to stop a bullying case right in that moment, or identify signals, details that can prevent a future case of bullying. So don't ignore it. And that's all we have regarding the conceptual part of the reflection activities. I will present you now the first practical activity of the Model 6 that will provide you the opportunity to reflect and build your own concept of reflection activity. It will be displayed in the following 3 slides, 3 different statements. Please reflect alone on each one for about 2 minutes. 2 minutes for each sentence. You can only reflect, or you can also write down your thoughts, feelings, opinions, and everything that comes to your mind regarding that specific sentence. At the end of the 3 reflections, please take 5 minutes to build your own description of reflection activity according not only to your previous 3 reflections, but also considering the inputs taken in this learning unit. For this activity, you will need only a paper and a pen or pencil, depending on your preferences. And it's also advisable to perform this activity in a relaxed or silent environment. Are you ready to go? The first sentence is, as educators, we know how critical reflection is to the learning process. Getting students to reflect deeply and meaningfully is often one of the most challenging lessons we teach. Please take 2 minutes to reflect on this. 3, 2, 1. And 2 minutes is gone. Reorienting our minds to quickly reflect on such specific topic is quite hard, isn't it? The second sentence is, it is clear that the power in learning is in the action of doing the activity. Reflection provides the same power through the action of articulating thoughts. Reflection is a necessary bridge in the learning process that takes place when a student is involved in a service learning experience. Please take 2 minutes to write down your comments on this. And 3, 2, 1, go. And let's move to the third sentence. The sentence number 3 is: reflection activities play an important role in helping us analyze, understand, and gain meaning. Reflection activities can be used at the beginning, middle, and end of a learning experience. Please take 2 more minutes to reflect on this. 3, 2, 1, go. And it's end. It's getting less difficult to reflect, no? We are now moving to the last task of this exercise. Now, please take 5 minutes to build your own concept of reflection activity, considering your own conclusions and thoughts, as well as the knowledge acquired in previous slides. Ready? You have now 5 minutes. Just an input, your description can just start by reflection activities are, or a reflection activity can be perceived as, or the something can be also considered as a reflection activity. Of course, you are free to use any other structure. Good luck! You have now 1 minute. And its end. As an option, you can also share your own concept with the colleagues and rewrite a new one. You can do it in peers or in a group. If there is something unclear to you so far, please note it and write us your feedback. All you can say to help us improving our training will be very valuable for us. Thank you very much. We will now proceed to the second learning unit. Learning Unit B, Implementation of Reflection Activities. This learning unit is divided in 10 subunits, where each subunit corresponds to a different example of reflection activity. They are 1. Reflexive sketches, 2. The snowball, 3. Critical incident journal, 4. Unfinished story, 5. Taking sides, 6. Wall exercises, 7. Sticky notes, 8. Anti-bullying reflection questions for an action plan, 9. Focusing on the positive side of colleagues, and 10. Role play. At the end of the learning unit, it will be given you 2 different exercises to practice the knowledge you acquire through the learning unit. The objective of this learning unit is to acknowledge different reflection activities, and at the end of the learning unit, you should be able to put in practice at least one reflection activity. The skills you are expected to have at the end of the learning unit are to be able to implement reflection activities and to take advantage of them to intervene in the topic of bullying with a group of students. The following set of activities will bring you a lot of new information. So, at the end of the module, you are advised to reflect on all of these activities, and in case you deem necessary, please consult the module again. Reflection activity number 1. Reflexive sketches. The objective of reflexive sketches is putting students into touch with their own individual through constructed perspective about what they have seen, learned, or discussed. This activity is best used with students over 10 years old, since this activity requires the capacity to express students' feelings through drawing. This is actually an excellent activity to be implemented within the classroom context, and it can be implemented after a learning experience or after a specific moment or situation. And any teacher can implement it since it does not require specific knowledge. This can also be a fun, unique and creative way not only to involve our students, but also to have them reflecting about a specific situation, for instance, an imminent bullying case. However, in order for this activity to work well, it's important that they clearly understand that their drawing skills are not being evaluated. To implement this activity, you will need white paper and pencil. And regarding time, you will need 5 minutes to present the activity to the class, 15 minutes for drawing, 2 minutes per student to present their sketches, and 5 minutes for the assessments. In order to implement properly this activity, the teacher must ask students to draw a sketch about what has been discussed, learned, or about a specific situation that has occurred. Through this sketch, for instance a simple picture, the students must transmit the lessons learned and also their feelings towards the topic or that specific situation. The important here is their individual interpretation, perspective, and feelings, and never the quality of the drawing. After the drawing moment, please ask students to present their sketches and to explain what the sketches means, why they draw that specific sketch, and what feelings they should transmit. It's very important that during the development of the activity, you pay very attention to understand if students are being able to participate in the activity in the way which is desired. Are they being able to express their feelings and own perspectives through drawing? Also, at the end of the activity, when they are in the group discussion, you should understand how students felt during the activity by approaching them directly through questions. Reflection activity number 2, the snowball. This activity enables students, through anonymity, to share their most honest feelings and thoughts about bullying. This activity is best used when students are 10 years old or more, since it requires the capacity to express their feelings through writing. This is a very adaptable reflection activity since it can be implemented inside the classroom, outside the classroom, or after a school trip. And also to discuss a bullying situation that may have occurred or that a colleague or other peer is undergoing, or simply for discussing the topic of bullying in general. This activity can be used to intervene in a situation of bullying by modifying it and asking students to add to their reflection some compliments for one another. It can also be used to allow students to add questions about bullying without feeling embarrassed about it. To implement the snowball reflection activity, you will need white paper and pencil, and regarding the time, you will need 5 minutes to present the activity to the class, 15 minutes for writing, 10 to 20 minutes for a group discussion, and 5 minutes for the assessment. As already mentioned, one of the main important characteristics of this activity is based on the fact that it allows students to be anonymous, which will help guarantee that they feel free to be honest about what they have write as their reflections. Ask students to write a small paragraph with their reflection about the event in question, and then students must turn their papers into snowballs and throw them across the room. Each student must pick one snowball and read the reflection aloud, one at each time. Through group discussion, at the end of the activity, the teacher or the facilitator must be attentive and understand how the students felt by performing this activity through direct questions. Reflection activity number 3, critical incident journal. Through this reflection activity, students are given the opportunity not only to deeply analyze their thoughts and feelings towards a certain event related to bullying, but also to think about what to do next time they happen to be in the same or similar situation. All of this done in a guided way. This activity is best used with students over 10 years old, since this requires the capacity to express students' feelings through writing. When one has to write about his or her reflection, the reflection process becomes a double effort, since the process of writing, in comparison to speaking, requires more thoughts are out to their minds, and it's not as direct nor allows for impulsiveness. Students must report on critical incidents by explaining what makes these incidents critical. These incidents can be positive or negative events which the student participated or witnesses but did not play an active role. To implement critical incident journal activity, you will need at least white paper and pencil. There is the option to send journaling through email, and if that is the case, students will need access to a computer, internet, and a personal email account. Regarding the time, you will need 5 minutes to present the activity to the class, 20 to 30 minutes for writing, and 5 minutes for the assessment. In this activity, students are asked to write about the analysis they have constructed for a particular event that occurred during the week. Here, the facilitator needs to have a more active role in order to ensure that students make a thorough link between the event that they are describing and the learning process that it must have triggered, and not simply a long description of the situation. Examples of questions are: describe a significant event that occurred. Why was this significant to you? Why underlying issues, societal, interpersonal, surfaced as a result of this experience? How will this incident influence your future behavior? Another example of questions are: describe an accident or situation that created a dilemma for you in terms of what to say or do. What is the first thing you thought of to say or to do? List 3 other actions you may have taken. Which of the above seems best to you now, and why do you think this is the best response? After students write their reflection on these questions, it's important that the facilitator takes the time to analyze all the journaling entries and to give some feedback to each one of them, especially concerning the actions thought to be taken in a future situation. Reflection activity number 4, unfinished story. With this activity, the facilitator will be able to promote teamwork and efforts not only to come up with an adequate ending, but particularly to collaborate, make a reflection about the bullying situation or lesson. It is best used with students over 10 years old, since this reflection activity requires the capacity for students to reflect their feelings through writing. For this activity, you will need white paper and pencil, and also 5 minutes to present the activity to the class, 15 minutes for writing, 10 minutes for group discussion, and 5 minutes for assessment. For this activity, students will need to work in pairs of 2. The facilitator will tell 80% of the story or a lesson about bullying, so for this you will need to prepare in advance the story or lesson before the class, or you can write your own or search examples on internet. After, students in pairs will complete the story according to what they believe could be a realistic ending. With this activity, the facilitator can also explore assumptions, stereotypes, and other things. Before the activity ending, the facilitator should try to understand if each student was able to reflect about, first, the story common to all students, and secondly, the different constructed endings. Please ask students to share their endings and to share how they felt performing this activity. Reflection activity number 5, taking sides. With this activity, the facilitator aims at promoting students' capacity of reflecting on the different sides involved in a bullying situation, and also to encourage their ability of putting themselves in someone else's shoes. is best used with students over 10 years old since this activity requires capacity to express their feelings through writing. Students must be informed that there aren't right or wrong answers. However, at the end of the activity, the facilitator must gather all students to discuss the results obtained, making this also a didactic experience. To implement this activity, it is advisable to have white paper and pencils, but it's not mandatory. You will need 5 minutes to present the activity to the class, 10 minutes for groups to prepare their sites, 20 to 35 minutes of role-playing, 10 minutes for final discussion, and 5 minutes for the assessments. This activity is to be implemented after the facilitator presents a given situation or story about bullying. So, you should also prepare in advance a bullying story or lesson. You can write it or search an example on internet. At the class, please read the full story. Then, the facilitator must randomly separate students into 3 groups and assign a role to each group. One group will represent the bully, another group the victim, and the other group the adults that intervene to mediate and help to solve the situations. For instance, teachers, counselors, parents, others. Each group must internalize their own role and role-playing, having in mind finding a realistic solution to the situation. The goal here is to have students taking the perspective of others and working together for a common solution while deeply reflecting about their own beliefs and feelings towards the given situation, but acting upon someone else's perspective. They are not expected to solely attack the bully and blindly defend the victim. They are expected to try to understand 1. The reason the bully acts the way she acts, what the victim can do to defend him or herself, and to try to change the situation. And third, what can adults do not only to stop the bullying situation, not only to punish the bully, but also what they can do to prevent it from happening again and to help both the victim and the bullies. Through group discussion, at the end of the activity, teachers or the facilitator must understand how the students felt by performing this activity, approaching them through direct questions. Reflection activity number 6, WOW exercises. This activity aims to promote children's capacity to analyze different materials about bullying, namely, to reflect about them and about what makes them feel, and to express their opinions. This activity is best used with students over 10 years old, since this activity requires the capacity to express their feelings through writing. To implement this activity, you will need white paper and pencils, as well as to prepare different informative materials about bullying in advance. Regarding the time, you will need 5 minutes to present the activity to the class, 15 to 20 minutes for each student to see the posted material and comment on it, 10 minutes for reading out loud all the shared opinions, 10 minutes for the final discussion, and 5 minutes for the assessment. In order for this activity to work, the facilitator, first of all, must choose a variety of newspaper clippings, stories, quotes, pictures, or other materials that in some way pertain to the topic of bullying that the facilitator wishes to discuss during the reflection activity. The facilitator then posts all this material on the wall around the classroom with a blank sheet of paper next to each one, so students can write down their reactions and reflections about the posted materials. Students must then walk around the room silently, reading and or observing the material and sharing their opinion by writing anonymously. Once students have finished, one student per posted material must be selected to read out loud the different opinions. To finalize the activity, the facilitator should stimulate students to discuss together as a class about the materials. Expressed opinions are anonymous and everyone should be respectful of them, especially if they comment on them. Through group discussion at the end of the activity, the facilitator must understand how students felt by performing this activity and approaching them through direct questions. Once a week, students must write down freely one reflection that they had had about bullying, either about the discussion they have made in the class, about a situation they might have witnessed, about a situation they have might suffered, or about anything as long as it's related with bullying. Students must not interact with each other while they haven't finished this task, in order to ensure that they are not influenced by their colleagues. These sticky notes must be posted on the wall of the classroom anywhere at the eye level, and as the last activity of the week, students must have the chance to view each other's reflections, and the facilitator must engage in a group discussion as to debrief about what students have learned and experienced. Reflection activity number 8. Anti-bullying reflection questions for an action plan. The objective of this activity is to encourage students not only to reflect about bullying, but also about each other's behavior, and to analyze possible actions that can be put in place, allowing them to feel that they can have a positive impact, solving and preventing bullying situations. This activity is most appropriate with older teenagers over 15 years old, since it requires more complex thought processes. Facilitator should take advantage from this activity as a way of having students discussing with each other their feelings and opinions, defending their points of view, but also to learn from each other's and to be able to integrate each other's ideas when they make sense. In order to organize such activity, you will need white paper, pencils, and the list of questions for reflection that I will read in the next slide. If the activity is to be fully completely, the rest of the materials needed will depend on what and how students decide to develop their solutions. Regarding the time, this is also will vary according to what students decide to solve or with kind of solutions they have. So we will give you the expected overall time, but then you should have an extra a little time for this activity in case students need. So we will need 10 minutes to explain the activity of the class, because this is a more complex activity, 20 to 30 minutes for the individual reflection, 30 to 40 minutes for small group reflection and to present it to the class, 20 minutes for students to share their difficulties that they had in working in small groups and getting consensus between them, 15 minutes for students to choose 3 intervention ideas, and then the time needed for the development and implementation of these chosen ideas. in the end of the activity, 5 minutes for the assessment in group discussion. This will only apply if this activity is implemented in a shorter version until step number 5. The activity, implemented as it is something that will take some time. As such, it can be implemented as a class project, which can be finished with a presentation to the whole school. On the other hand, this activity can be adapted in order to make it a much shorter activity or only an individual assignment. The shorter version can be implemented until the step number 1, 3, or 4. One of the materials needed is the list of the questions for reflection. Examples are: do you think bullying is a serious problem in your school or community? Explain why. How do you think bullies feel when they demean someone else? Do you think it's possible to make a bully understand other people's feelings? Explain why. How do adults in your school or community address bullying? Have you seen adults look to the other way? What kind of interventions have you seen adults use to prevent or stop bullying? What kind of interventions can young people use to prevent or stop bullying? List 3 things you could do to diffuse a bullying situation. Do you think you ever bullied someone? If so, what made you stop? What made you want to bully someone? Did any of the above mentioned facts concern you personally? If yes, which ones? Are there behaviors or experiences you have had that you want to change? Describe your feelings, what you might want to change, and how you could go about making that change. In order to stimulate personal reflection and the discussion, facilitators must, first, ask students to individually to think about and write down their personal answers to these reflection questions that I've read before. Separate the class into groups of a maximum of 4 elements and have students to come to a consensus about a common answer to all of the initial reflection questions. Third, have all groups presenting their answers and analyze where they differ and discuss about these differences. Fourth, ask it to each student to explain where they had to compromise their own initial answers in order to being able to reach a consensus within the group and to explain their reflection when their perspective was very different from the one adopted by the group. Fifth, from question number 8, as a B group, the facilitator should have all students to decide on 3 different and realistic ideas about what can be done to promote a positive change. After all the class agrees on the 3 ideas, the facilitator should help the class and divide it into big groups, 1 for each idea. With the facilitator's supervision and help, each group must define an action plan in order to implement an intervention idea in their school or only in their class. It depends on the impact you would like to have with the class. That's why this activity can be promoted or developed as a project of the class. Reflection activity number 9. Focusing on the positive side of colleagues. Through this activity, the aim is to show students that when they focus on the positive side of their colleagues, they end up valuing their virtues and their abilities, noticing that in reality there is never a reason to prejudice or bully someone. Having students to reflect only on the positive characteristics of their colleagues, they will understand that everyone has a good side, refuting any motives that one might have for bullying. This activity is appropriate for children with 8 or more years old, aiming at fighting the fact that some children end up being isolated from others due to prejudicing and the acts of bullying that they may be suffering from others. It's important to have them all reflecting about the positive aspects that everyone has, independently of their physical appearance, race, religion, color, sexual preferences, physical disabilities, economic status, etc. To implement this activity, you will need white paper and pencils. Regarding the time, you will need 5 minutes to present the activity to the class, 5 minutes for the preparation steps, 5 to 10 minutes for the first distribution of the papers and for students to write down 2 qualities, 15 minutes for collecting the papers, distributing them again, and having students reading out loud the qualities listed in the paper, and finally having a group discussion about the results observed, and 5 minutes for the assessment. For this, the facilitator will write down the name of each student on a small piece of paper, fold it in half or in 3 so that no one can find out the name that is written in the paper. Then, each student shall take a small paper by randomly taking one out. As each student picks one paper, they must not share with each other the name inside of the paper. Each student must write 2 positive qualities of the person written in the paper in the same paper. Students are not allowed to write offenses nor play rude pranks. The facilitator collects again the small papers, distributes them randomly among the students, and asks them to read out loud what is written in the paper that each one got. It's important that the facilitator closes this activity with a group discussion about students' perspectives concerning what this activity make them reflect about and the lessons learned. The reflection activity number 10 is role play. This activity aims at providing the possibility of reflecting about bullying in a playful and intelligent way by actually embodying a specific situation and character with their feelings according to the situation. This activity is more appropriate for children over 12 years old since it implies the planning of the entire role play. The duration of this activity will depend on how much time there is to apply it or to the final goal that wishes to attain. If there is not much time, the groups can prepare the story in 20 minutes, present it in 10 or 15 minutes, and the group discussion could last for around 10 minutes. If, on the other hand, there is a possibility to have more time to develop these role plays, and the reflection about it should go around 15 to 60 minutes to develop a more detailed and complex role play, around 30 minutes for each group to present their role play, and finally around 15 to 20 minutes for the final group discussion. The facilitator should also allocate around 5 minutes at the end for the assessment activity in group discussion. The facilitator must start by dividing the class in 2 groups. Each group must create a role play about bullying and school violence. One group must create a more positive story, while the other one a more negative one. Although both stories should be independent, both groups must initially work together since both stories should picture different situations and endings. After preparing the story as well as the role play, both groups are expected to present it to the class. After the presentation, the facilitator must moderate and stimulate the group discussion about the presentation, analyzing the story, the character, the context, and each one's feelings and reflections. And these were the set of 10 reflection activities that you can start now implementing with your students. In order to proceed to the second practical activity, please take a moment to review all the previous activities and choose one of them to organize with your class. Before picking up the activity, please consider the age group of your students and the changes you would like to see after the activity. Please prepare the materials and space needed to implement the activity. Report implementation and the results gathered in a table just like the one presented in the next slide. And also invite peers to implement the same activity in their classes and discuss different reflections and conclusions. But of course, the last part is optional. After choosing the activity from the set that we have presented before in this last learning unit, you have this reporting table to help you out to structuring and reflect about the results of these activities. In this reporting table, you must report the problematic under work, the type of groups involved, and in which context the activity was implemented. Remember, I've mentioned this in the first learning unit. You must also report the main conclusions taken from the assessment at the end of the activity and write down your own reflections about details and other specific facts that could be interesting to remind later. Pictures could be also good for memory and report file. But remember, these must be never a full body pictures nor have the faces of the students. Pictures must only be taken to the ends or lower body parts or to the results or products such as written texts, drawings, lists, etc. These pictures can be included in the pictures file together with other pictures from other activities. If you find any difficulty in implementing the activity you have chosen, please ask for guidance to our contacts or just ask a little help of a colleague. Since this activity is too long, I will present you the third and last practical activity of the module, and then I will let you 1 hour to challenge yourself and reflect a bit about all of these activities and develop the second and third practical activity. Then, if you want, we'll be pleased to hear about your results when implementing reflection activities. In this activity, you are given the opportunity to develop your own reflection activity. To help you with that, I'm providing here a table that will support you the design process of the activity. You can do it alone or together in a group. The important here is to research and be creative. Remember that you can create a reflection activity based on existent ones and adjust them to the bowling topic. As soon as you finish, please try it with your class. You can use the same previous table to report the results of the activity and improve it in case you deem necessary. This planning table includes for you to write the name of the activity, the objective, the target groups, the implementation steps, the duration, the materials needed, the context of implementation, the assessment process, and link on further resources that supported you to develop this reflection activity. Again, if you have any question or difficulties, please write us to the contacts available to you. These are the links and resources that help us to build this module and to develop these reflection activities, not only the theoretical part but also the practical one. So if you'd like to know more or to explore each other's further way, please give a chance to these links and to this all web graphy that we will provide you in the next 2 slides. Thank you very much for attending this module developing session for reflection activities. And if you have any further remarks that you would like us to know or to improve, please contact us for the email or website or cell phone number provided here. Please remember that we would like you to take the next hour for choosing the reflection activity that you would like to test in your class, and also to develop your own reflection activity. I hope you enjoyed the past hour and have a nice day.